Section 1.2, maximum speed and altitude. Okay, so basic stuff here again. How fast can I fly? 100 miles an hour or 87 knots. They're the same value, so know them both. There's just translation. The reality is almost all of your DJI drones aren't going to get to 100 miles per hour. So this isn't really all that useful in reality. I suppose if you have a fixed wing drone or some sort of FPV rocket you're doing for competition, yeah, okay, I guess maybe you can get faster than 100 miles an hour. I don't. When I fly, I've never even gotten close to a third of that, right? So 30 miles an hour, maybe if I'm gunning it downwind. But I can see a test question on that. It's pretty straightforward. So memorize that: 100 miles an hour or 87 knots. And the reality is also that at 100 miles an hour, you can no longer see your drone, which is you always need to be able to see your drone. So it would be you're getting kind of illegal anyways. So, but anyways, probably not going to happen. But just memorize those. How high can you fly? Kind of the standard basic answer is 400 feet above the ground level. So wherever you're standing, that's 0 at your feet, and then 400 feet up is the maximum altitude. Okay, there's an exception to this. So this is where they may try to trick you up a little bit. So here's the basics: 400 feet. The exception: so you can fly within 400 feet of a buffer of something, right? So if I have a building, 100-foot building, I'm allowed to fly. You have to factor in that 100 feet, right? So here's this explains it better. I'm allowed to fly 100 feet over that building. So I could go up to 500 feet above ground level, because if I'm working on the top of that building, that they're going to give me 400 feet over that. So that's fine. As we'll see later, and I'll loop back to this, that, this may be a problem when you start to get too high. If you have a, 400-foot building and a 400-foot above that might get you into another airspace, Class E airspace, and then which you cannot do. So you might hit the roof of that. So there's an exception there. We'll get into that later. But anyway, so it's a 400-foot boundary around the building. Think of like a cylinder around this building, 400 feet, and I can go 400 feet to either side of it, distance-wise. So that's the exception. All right. I talked about above ground level, AGL. So let's talk about above ground level and mean sea level, because these are a little bit tricky. Manned pilots have to deal with this more so than us. Like, as drone pilots, we're on the ground all the time. So we are kind of looking at the world from above ground level. Like, how high is my drone? That's my above ground level number. Mean sea level, if I'm standing on the ground in Denver, Colorado, I'm at 5,280 feet above sea level, right? If my drone is 100 feet up, it's at 5,380 feet above sea level, like above sea level, MSL. This has to do with pilots and their altimeters, and their altimeters read in MSL and mean sea level. So if they're coming to a mountain, they need to be able to look on the map, see the height of that mountain and mean sea level, and know if they are going to get over it, right? So that's what we have to think about, right? So this can be a little tricky when you're looking at your charts, because the charts are kind of designed for manned pilots who might have to deal with MSL. So a lot of times they'll give you the numbers in both, or depends on what you're looking at. We'll get into this more when we talk about airspace. But for an example here, I've got a lighted tower. It's 300 feet in the air. The top of that tower is 300 feet above ground level. Could be anywhere in the world. It's 300 feet above ground level, right? It's a 300-foot tall tower. If it's at 40 feet above sea level, the measurement is 340 feet above sea level, right? So we know we're 40 feet above above sea level there. Pro tip, this isn't on the exam. This is just I don't want that. It moved. Pro tip. So when you're taking off and you're setting up your mission, think about where you're at and think about where you're going to be flying. And it may matter. So if you are going to, say we've got this area of the Earth that we want to fly. My advice would be to take off at the high point, because you can go up 400 feet above that. If you go up to, you're at the bottom of a cliff and you take off, and technically you should stay within 400 feet of where you took off from, and you have a 200-foot cliff. Now you can only go up 200 feet over the cliff. If you start at the top of the cliff, take off from the high point, and then you have more room to deal with. So probably not an issue, especially if you're in a flat area. But if you're flying in the mountains or, places with varied terrain, take off from the high point. And you're covered, right, from an FAA perspective. All right, next we'll talk about flying over people.